Van Lam held out his hand, his face slightly flustered, and said, take out the mirror from earlier and let me see it. Where did it come from? If my suspicion is correct, I'll pay a high price for it immediately. Lai Vantiu pointed behind him and said, it was at a pawn shop earlier. It was an overdue item that hadn't been redeemed, so the owner handled it himself. I paid triple the price to get my hands on it. It cost me 30,000 mid-grade primordial stones. Van Lam stood frozen like a statue, not believing a single word, and forced a smile, asking if the shop owner mentioned who had worn it. Lai Vantiu thought for a moment and said, I heard it was an old man, around 60 or 70 years old. Van Lam lunged forward, grabbed his arm, and excitedly said, 60 or 70 years old. That's it. That's my father's mirror. I've finally found it. Heaven truly does not disappoint those who seek. Van Lam wept like a torrential rain, explaining that the mirror was his mother's dowry. She and his father were childhood sweethearts, carefree and innocent, and it was thanks to this mirror that the love blossomed. Later, my father was forced to sell the mirror, and even on his deathbed, he still wished to redeem it. You surely understand the feeling of being a powerless son, don't you? Today, I have a chance to retrieve it on the anniversary of my father's death. Help me fulfill this filial duty, brother, and together let us praise a father's boundless love. Lai Vantiu stood watching this grand performance, seeing Van Lam covered in tears and snot, and he just wanted to award him the title of best actor right then and there. Lai Vantiu said with a strange tone, best actor? Pardon me, brother Van Lam. The shop owner said the person who pawned the mirror had sold his wife to a brothel before doing so. Could it be your mother? He pretended to tremble. Van Lam's face turned black as the bottom of a pot, his eyes blazing with fire. Thick-skinned as he was, he wouldn't admit his mother was a prostitute, so he lowered his voice and said, I must have remembered it wrong. Ah, I see. Lai Vantiu feigned understanding and said, this mirror has nothing to do with you then. I have things to do, so I'll be going. Brother Van Lam, let's meet again. Van Lam rolled his eyes and quickly smiled, saying, but you're still wandering around here, aren't you? Have you heard about the big event in Haningite City? Asterisk here we go again. Asterisk Lai Vantiu cursed inwardly, but maintained a nonchalant facade as he asked, what is it? Did the head of the Qin family get killed, or was the mother of Qin and Yuk Bang lured into bed? Or perhaps it hasn't reached that point yet. Van Lam scratched his head and said, the goddess has run away. I just received news from the organization that she has disappeared from the Qin family. Now the whole place is in chaos, and Haningite City is under lockdown. No one is allowed to leave, and even the space tunnels have been sealed. Just imagine, if the Qin family is absent from the upcoming martial arts competition to select a son-in-law, that would be a huge joke. Lai Vantiu looked at him mockingly. Aren't you a devotee of the goddess? Why are you gloating over her misfortune? Van Lam looked as miserable as a funeral attendee and said, not at all, I'm just worried about where she is now. Does she have hot food in the morning? Is there roast duck if she's hungry? Is there a place to rest if she's tired? He mourned as if he had actually lost his wife. Lai Vantiu cut him off. Yeah, I get it. Either way, I'm not giving you this mirror. Van Lam wiped his sweat and babbled, I'm telling you the truth. Your mirror is clearly a cursed object. It's best to throw it away for the sake of peace. Give it to me to handle. I will find a powerful refiner to smelt it so it doesn't harm anyone else. Lai Vantiu said, you can have the mirror, but you must offer something in exchange. Van Lam's eyes brightened and he said, fine. To destroy this harmful thing, I would even pluck the stars from the sky for you. Lai Vantiu pretended to be respectful. So, your name is Van Lam. We've met several times, but this is the first I've known. Actually, it would only take 24 East Sea Moon pearls to trade for it. Van Lam acted as if he were being choked and cried out, that's the treasure of the East Sea. Each pearl is worth a whole city. 24 pearls combined form the 24 bridge moonlit night phenomenon that's worth even more than a grade 9 mystical weapon. Were you joking? Lai Vantiu laughed lightly and said, you're quite knowledgeable, not like a typical disciple of the martial emperor pavilion. Van Lam also laughed and replied, you too a martial ancestor holding such a curse mirror. Lai Vantiu smiled and said, life is unpredictable. Stop acting. The great sorrow grave writing mirror is precious, but not for sale unless I get those 24 East Sea Moon pearls. Don't even talk to me if you're short one. Van Lam shuddered, astonished. What? This really is the great sorrow grave writing mirror? Lai Vantiu replied, there seem to be some words on the mirror, but I'm not entirely sure. Van Lam's face changed color as he said, if it were a few months ago, there might have been a way, but now it's difficult. These Sea Moon pearls are almost all in the hands of the Qin family's mistress, Nuin Haninguk. Lai Vantiu said, your information network is quite sharp. Van Lam nodded and said, it seems you know that too. Even Nuin Haninguk only has 18 pearls, collected from the Eastern region and the Trading Alliance. Getting them isn't impossible. I heard in the organization that those 18 pearls are part of Qin and Yukbang's dowry. What? The dowry? Lai Vantiu was startled. Van Lam handed over a jade slip and said, tea for yourself. It was just announced. The Qin family is real playing for keeps this time. Lai Vantiu held the jade slip to his forehead and read it. Not long after, he frowned. Van Lam looked at him with a meaningful smile and said, what, playing to go to the martial arts competition to select a son-in-law? Even though the Sea Moon pearls are valuable, they pale in comparison to other prizes, and since it's been announced to the world, it's going to be doubly difficult to get them any other way. Lai Vantiu held the jade slip and thought, then asked, were you not interested in such treasures and a beauty? Van Lam laughed in response, even if I were interested, I'd need the strength. The 7 stars of the Eastern region and the 5 heroes of the Western region are all monstrously powerful. It's just a thought. Lai Vantiu laughed coldly. Without the Sea Moon pearls, the mirror will remain only in your memory. Farewell. Pay, don't leave. Let's negotiate further. Van Lam shouted from behind, but he didn't even bother to turn around. Suddenly, he let out a loud roar. Brother Lai, look at this. Lai Vantiu was startled and nearly jumped out of his skin. He stopped, and his figure slowly turned around, only to see strange white light sparkling in Van Lam's eyes. A strange, pulsating force rippled outward. It was clearly a mental power attack. Eye technique. Lai Van T was stunned for a moment before nearly bursting into laughter. In the ancient Thien Thai kingdom, there was a saying, it was like dancing with a sword before Kuan Yu or reciting literature before Confucius. Now he truly understood the meaning of that idiom. He smiled faintly, and the primordial heaven eye on his forehead suddenly opened. That eye instantly transformed into a terrifying, blood-red moon. The light in Van Lam's eyes momentarily froze, then gradually dimmed, finally turning into a hazy void. Just in time. Let me see what your background is. Lai Yingxiao thought as his spiritual power surged out through the ancient heavenly eye. It plunged straight into his opponent's mind, beginning to rummage through Van Lam's memories from childhood to adulthood. Everything was clearly revealed under his divine sense, with not a single secret remaining. The sequence of memories flipped like a rapidly turning scroll. What surprised him was that this person actually belonged to the sanctuary. Suddenly, his divine sense trembled. He saw that Van Lam's memories from the moment he joined the sanctuary were locked behind layers of seals, making them impossible to view. What is this? This is the yellow light seal. Lai Yingxiao's mind was violently shaken. His eyes were filled with shock. In the entire world, the only person capable of using this was Cao Han's master, Tian Zhaozai, who lived in seclusion in the divine capital of the sanctuary. Could this person have been sent by Tian Zhaozai, carrying such a monumental secret? A sense of foreboding rose within him. This matter was so grave that even he dared not get involved recklessly. No wonder he recognized the great compassion twilight cloud mirror. It turned out he was one of Tian Zhaozai's people. Lai Yingxiao pondered for a moment before turning away and disappearing into the crowd. A short while later, Van Lam slowly regained consciousness. As the events rushed back to him, his face turned pale. How can this be? He muttered in panic. Impossible. I was the one who ended up being suppressed by him. Fear filled his eyes as he muttered to himself, just now, my sea of consciousness was a chaotic mess. Did he read my memories? Fortunately, Lord Tian Zhaozai's seal was in my mind. I was annoyed when it was placed, but who would have thought it would save my life today? Van Lam took a deep breath to suppress his emotions and gradually calmed down. That person's background must be thoroughly investigated, he mused. Not only does he possess incredible divine sense, but he also has a great compassion twilight cloud mirror. Now that legendary treasure has appeared, I must seize it at any cost. The jade slip Van Lam had given Lai Yingxiao contained vast amounts of information. By the next day, news of Zhang Yuobin's betrothal gifts had spread throughout the city, causing a massive stir. The most valuable items included a true dragon secret treasure, a grade 9 profound artifact, 18 East Sea moonlit pearls, a heaven-working bone-refining imperial pill, and an opportunity to enter the Zhang family's martial pavilion to choose a weapon. The true dragon secret treasure was actually a dragon whisker left behind by an ancient true dragon, an exquisite grade item said to hold the secret to entering the divine realm. This revelation incited fervor not only in the younger generation but also among their elders. Some who were reluctant to compete were even kicked out by the seniors and forced to participate. As for the grade 9 profound artifact, it was the Samsara treasure saber, refined by Lu Tanzi. These sea moonlit pearls were truly world-class treasures that could calm the mind and focus the spirit. Carrying one was like having a protective amulet that could dispel inner demons during cultivation. Legend says that gathering 24 of them would manifest the celestial vision of 24 bridges under a moonlit night, allowing one to ascend to immortality. Meanwhile, the heaven-working bone-refining imperial pill was a genuine grade 9 pill that significantly increased the chances of breaking through to the martial emperor realm. Finally, the Zhang family's martial scriptures spoke for themselves. Techniques like the Pure Yan True Formula and the Thousand-Leaf Spirit Brilliance art were legendary, having produced peak powerhouses whose names struck fear into the world. Mastering just one of them would be enough to dominate. This was not to mention the countless pills, profound artifacts, origin stones, spirit herbs, and treasures piled high. Detailing them all would likely take until the end of the competition. It was nearly the entire wealth of a mid-sized sect. Near the center of Red Moon Sea stood 3 exquisite and majestic pavilions. Although they were not as imposing as the city lord's mansion, the picturesque architecture resembled a celestial realm. This place was known as the Clear Wind and Bright Moon. On the Red Dragon Bridge hung several elegant seal script characters. Those entering the pavilion require a clear wind. Those drinking with me have only the bright moon. Inside one of the pavilions, a beautiful woman in palace attire looked at the man before her and asked, Temu, do you still resent your uncle? The man's expression was as calm as autumn water as he replied composedly, Temu would not dare. My uncle is the city lord of Red Moon City, a world-renowned and rare hero. I have always looked up to him as a model, focusing solely on my cultivation and never daring to slacken on the path of martial arts. The beautiful woman smiled with satisfaction and praised him. You truly haven't disappointed your aunt or your father. You have become the young leader of the Eastern region. As long as you continue to work hard, you will surely surpass your predecessors in the future. Yes, Temu will keep that in mind, Nuin said with a slight bow. However, there is a doubt in my heart that is becoming increasingly difficult to understand. I hope you can enlighten me. The woman glanced at her nephew and said leisurely, you are only troubled because of a Yuobing. If you truly have solid ability and reach the peak of the martial path, there will be no shortage of women in the world for you to choose from. You are the eldest son of the Nuin family and the leader of the Eastern region's 7 stars, yet you are moping over a woman. Do you intend to disappoint me? This woman was none other than Nuin Hunguk, the wife of the city lord of Red Moon Sea. Nuin replied, I wouldn't dare. But isn't the pursuit of the peak of martial arts for the sake of roaming the world freely? If I cannot even keep the person I love, what meaning is there in so-called ruling over the world? Nuin Hunguk said coldly, Yuobin's marriage is for the benefit of Red Moon Sea. Marrying her to you would be a waste of a valuable asset. His eyes narrowed slightly as he said calmly, forming marriage alliances with various sexes only to maintain Red Moon City's status in the heavenly martial realm, but external forces are difficult to rely on for long. If you marry Yuobin to me, I will surely reach the peak of the martial path within 50 years and lead Red Moon City to stand equal to the sanctuary of the Sea of Soul Formation. His words were as firm as iron and his face remained composed, but the burning fire in his eyes caused even Nuin Hunguk to be momentarily startled. Nuin Hunguk nodded in praise. The Nuin family should have such spirit. However, Yuobin cannot be married to you. That is your uncle's decision, and no one can change it. As for any other woman in the sea or across the continent, if you take a fancy to her, your aunt can arrange it. Nuin Zimu looked up and said, I am not asking to marry Yuobing. I only asked for a chance to participate in the martial arts tournament to prove with my own strength that marriage alliances are just a joke. True strength lies in oneself. Nuin Haninguk frowned and said, you are right, but throughout history, those who dominated the world alone have been as rare as stars. For a power to stand firm, it must form alliances or diversify. Individual martial prowess is like fireworks that fade quickly. Only a solid foundation for a sect ensures longevity. In the past, if the Nuin family had not relied on the connections when they faced a catastrophe, they would have turned to dust. There is still much to learn about being a leader. Nuin Tumao bowed his head and said, I will remember your teachings, but regarding NH-led-1B0 led-1E3C Bang, my cousin, I hope to have the opportunity to spar with the heroes of the world. It would also be a good way to see my own shortcomings clearly so that I can improve. Nuin Haninguk sighed helplessly. She waved her sleeve and sighed, fine, the Nuin family has declined in recent years, and it is rare to find a successor like you. My hopes for the future rest on your shoulders. Your aunt will try to help, but since NH-led-1B0 led-1E3C Bang is not my biological daughter, my influence is limited. I will speak to your uncle, but that girl is headstrong and keeps sneaking off to play, which is very frustrating. A look of joy appeared on Nuin Tumao's face, and he hurriedly said, thank you, aunt. NH-led-1B0 led-1E3C Bang is just a little stubborn. Where could she possibly run to in this Haningite city? Isn't she still within the palm of your hand? Nuin Haninguk smiled slightly and said, it is good for her to let off some steam. It is natural to be a little anxious before major life events. I will handle the arrangements for you to participate in the competition. If you truly win the championship, your uncle will surely agree to marry NH-led-1B0 led-1E3C Bang to you. We can also use this opportunity to announce that the Nuin family is standing tall once again. Nuin Tumao stood up and clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking, and said with high spirits, everything will be clear in due time. I will grasp the world in my hands. You can rest assured, I will not let you down. In an inconspicuous tavern, people were drinking and making noise. All eyes were fixed on a man who was smiling slyly. He teased those sitting there, telling them to keep dreaming. What do you know about the goddess of your life? I have some hot news I just heard. Every night, the second young lady of the Qin family uses 2 full basins of water to wash her feet, 1 basin for the left foot and 1 for the right. The man suddenly stopped, his eyes glancing toward the door. A man with a solemn expression walked in. He called out in surprise, Brother Tuthan, I didn't expect you to come to Haningite. The other person was indeed Tuthan. He stopped and said, so it is you, Parfai Bin. Since when did you become fond of desping? Parfai Bin laughed and said, I was bored waiting for the tournament, so I was looking for some entertainment. I heard that Nuin Tumunk, pet of the 7 stars, will be gathering heroes tomorrow at the Thanfon Meningite Tavern. Brother Tu, you surely won't miss it. Tuthan shook his head and said, I have matters to attend to. It is inconvenient for me to be in crowded places. He was not in the mood to talk much, so he exchanged a few words and went upstairs. Parfai Bin was secretly astonished, noting the other's complexion looked like he had suffered severe internal injuries. He wondered who he could have clashed with to end up in such a miserable state. In Tuthan's hand, he clutched a piece of bright green jade plaque. He sensed a faint guiding energy pointing toward a room. Arriving at the door of the guest room, he pushed it open and said, Brother Lai, I have arrived. This was a guest room connected to the training room. In just one night, it had consumed more than 100,000 mid-grade spirit stones. To break the seal on Lai Yun's arrow, Tuthan had tried every method, but it was hopeless. He even sought out Bui Menveen in hopes that the Lu Lai villa could help, but to his surprise, they were also helpless. What made him furious was, to ensure the safety of Bui Menveen, the people of Lu Lai villa used him as a test subject, subjecting him to all sorts of strange tortures. In the end, he was covered in injuries, yet there was still no progress. Fearing he would flee, they sent guards to wash him. Luckily, Tuthan managed to injure the guard and escape, then relied on the jade plaque to find Lai Yun's arrow. Lai Yun's arrow looked at him and smiled slightly. It seems you have suffered quite a bit. Tuthan's face flushed slightly, and with a hint of resentment, he said, I have brought the news. I hope you keep your word and remove the seal for me. Lai Yun's arrow calmly replied, go ahead and speak. Tuthan twitched the corner of his mouth as he looked at the other person, who was as carefree as the wind. He suddenly realized that the gap between them was not just in strength. He had been firmly controlled at 2D Mountain, and now he had even less room to resist. Tuthan sighed inwardly and said dejectedly, it seems I truly am a frog in a well, making a fool of myself in front of an expert. Lai Yun's arrow locked and said, the path of martial arts is vast. Even the strongest at the peak would not dare to say they know it all. Since I placed the seal, I must have had confidence. Why would I fear you running away? Tuthan sighed and said, I have heard the news about the Ein lady. She is the eldest daughter of the Qin family, Qin H led 1B0 led 1E3C Mai, the biological daughter of the mistress Nuin Haningok. Since she was Sin, she has suffered from a strange illness where she gains weight even without eating, which is why she has become like that. She rarely appears in public and is very sensitive about being talked about, so few dare to speak of it. Lai Yun's arrow said in surprise, is there real such a strange illness? For a woman, that is worse than death. Tuthan smiled bitterly and said, what else could it be? Otherwise, she would have inherited the beauty of her parents and been a beauty herself. She would not have become a round, ugly, and unpleasant block of eyes. One can easily guess that her older sister was jealous of her younger sister and secretly used underhanded tactics. Lai Yun's arrow frowned and said, with the status and influence of the Haningite family, even a top healer could be invited, yet they are still unable to cure her. This is truly bizarre. Tuthan replied, I know this is not a matter to talk about freely, but it took a lot of digging to uncover some old stories. Have you ever heard of the earth-shattering event that happened in Haningite City back then? There was once someone who went on a killing spree in Haningite City, slaughtering over 30 martial emperors of the Nuin family in one go, nearly causing the entire power to vanish. That battle stained the city with blood, and the moon also turned as red as blood. That night, the name Haningite Red Moon was truly deserved, and that person was a destroyer martial emperor, Du Feiyang. Upon hearing this, Lai Yun's arrow's facial muscles twitched slightly. He broke into a sweat and said with a forced laugh, "The story is a bit exaggerated, but what does it have to do with the Iron Lady?" Tufan said gravely, "Of course it does. You also know that the Destroy Martial Emperor's ocular technique was unrivaled in the world, reaching a divine level capable of turning falsehood into truth and flipping the world upside down. That year, after the battle in Haningite, the Nuin family did not just lose over 30 martial emperors, but over 1,000 clansmen in the city were also struck by his ocular technique, becoming as dazed as lost souls, and it took several years for them to regain the senses one by one." That king continued, saying that back then, Nuin Haningak was also struck by the eye technique. At that time, she was already pregnant with Jiang Yuemai. Lai Yingxiao sighed and slapped his forehead, lamenting that it was indeed an unavoidable karmic fate. That king continued, saying when Jiang Yuemai was born, she weighed over 30 kilograms, and now she probably hadn't stopped even at 300. Afterward, City Lord Jian Shuoren sought medical help everywhere. Even Lu Tanzi personally came to Red Moon City but was helpless, even leaving a comment that plunged the mother and daughter into despair. Lai Yingxiao wiped his sweat, thinking unexpectedly it was caused by him, and then asked what Lu Tanzi had said. Zai King replied that Lu Tanzi said Jiang Yuemai still bore the eye technique curse seal of the Conqueror Martial Emperor. Unless he removed it himself, no one in the world could break it. Given the relationship between Red Moon City and the Conqueror Martial Emperor back then, how would Jian Shuoren Day seek him out? Later, during he had died, the curse seal became insoluble. Lai Yingxiao held his forehead, secretly thinking why he had bothered asking only to cause more trouble. Zai King sighed, saying this was no secret in Red Moon City but no one dared mention it. He had to go through a lot of trouble to hear it. As for Yan Xinghuer, he was Jiang Yuemai's childhood playmate. Because she was large, she had a strange personality. Nuin Haningak found many friends her age to play with, but she was both picky and fierce, so most were killed. Only Yan Xinghuer survived. There were even rumors that he was her gigolo. Lai Yingxiao's eyes sparkled, and he mused that it seemed Nuin Haningak indulged her daughter because he felt she was disadvantaged. If Jiang Yuemai were sent to demand the East Sea Moon Pearl, she might actually get it. Zai King paused and then laughed, asking why she would help him. That item was already the betrothal gift for Jiang Yuebing, unless he could make her buddy slim again. Lai Yingxiao glanced at him meaningfully and said, "Did you have the qualities of a prophet?" Zai King stood there dazed, not understanding at all. Lai Yingxiao said the news he brought was very valuable and that he was quite satisfied. His hand drew a seal and struck Zai King, causing the latter's body to tremble. He immediately felt the seal vanish, and his tortured body began to recover. He said in shock, "So it's finished." Lai Yingxiao smiled faintly and said, "It's over. You may leave. Next time we meet, I hope you have a bit more skill." Zai King's face turned pale and red, and he gritted his teeth, saying, "Next time I will take back the precious mirror and the other items. You better keep them safe." He didn't stay and vanished as he turned around. Lai Yingxiao gradually calmed down and sighed that his murderous aura had been too heavy in the past, harming many people. If he could help her refine her body, he would. Perhaps with the East Sea Moon Pearl, he could achieve a breakthrough. While he was thinking, a noise came from outside, followed by Zai King's angry roar. "Who are you to dare openly beat someone in Red Moon City?" The silhouette flickered and then appeared outside. The restaurant hall was in chaos, everyone scattered to watch the excitement. Ji Feiping lay on the ground injured, while a handsome young man in white held a sword to his neck, face as cold as ice. Behind him were Liu Qingyan and Nalan Jikun, their gazes also cold. Zai King stood aside in shock, asking what happened. Ji Feiping trembled and said, "I don't know you. Why did you attack me?" The young man in white had sharp eyes, and he asked coldly, word by word, "Those things you just said about the second young Miss Jan being surrounded, where did you hear them?" Lai Yingxiao looked over. Under his eye technique, the man in white actually had an Adam's apple. The pores were larger than a woman's. Clearly, it was a very high-level disguise. Even the two behind him were the same. It turned out they were all women in disguise. Ji Feiping felt wronged and smiled bitterly, saying those things were all rumors with many versions, and he only chose the one that sounded reasonable to retell. Lai Yingxiao was shocked. Combining the words with the news, he realized the person before him was the second young Miss Jiang who had just run away, the figure causing a stir throughout the world. Ji Feiping was stunned and muttered, "Could it be true?" Jiang Yuobing yelled in anger, "How dare you fabricate stories to defame the second young Miss Jiang? I'll kill you." She raised her sword to strike, but Liu Qingyan appeared and grabbed her wrist, saying calmly, "You can't kill him. The whole city's talking. Were you going to kill everyone in the world?" Ji Feiping trembled like a leaf, repeatedly saying, Right. Do you really want to kill everyone?" Jiang Yuobing stumped her foot and sheathed her sword, blaring as he said, "Dead lust. If you dare blabber again, I won't spare you." Ji Feiping shrunk his neck and hurriedly begged for mercy, promising not to say anything anymore. Just as he saved his life and was about to slip away, Liu Qingyan laughed and said, "Brother Zai, I didn't expect you to be safe. It seems your strength is beyond expectation." Zai King's face turned red with anger. It turned out this guy knew everything but hadn't said anything. How annoying. He snorted coldly and left with Ji Feiping, while Liu Qingyan turned his gaze. Looking toward Lai Yingxiao, who was leaning against the stairs, he smiled slightly and said, "We meet again. It seems today isn't a peaceful day either." Lai Yingxiao laughed and said, "Meeting by chance is better than meeting by appointment." Brother Liu took a trip to the city lord's manor. "It seems you've gathered quite a lot of spoils." King unfroze, his heart skipping a beat, secretly thinking whether Lai Yingxiao had realized Jiang Yuobing was a girl. Nalan Jikun, standing nearby, looked at Lai Yingxiao with grateful eyes and said softly, "Young Master Yingxiao is so noble. Jikun is truly extremely grateful." Lai Yingxiao immediately understood that Nalan Jikun had recognized him as the person who had acted earlier. He smiled lightly and said, "Lady Jikun, don't be formal. I'll need your care later. If I join the Silver Moon sect, remember to pick a few more pretty little sisters." Nalan Jikun blushed and said with an enchanting look, "If the young master truly joins, Jikun guarantees I'll pick until your eyes spin." Jiang Yuobing snorted coldly and said, "Sister Jikun, it's best not to get involved with this kind of drifter." Nalan Jikun smiled gently and said, "Little brother Bing doesn't know the full story. It's a bit complicated. How about we sit down and talk slowly?" "Fine. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and brother Luo is here as well. Zhang Yuobin's personality was naturally carefree. She quickly forgot all about being surrounded and attacked earlier. The four of them sat at the same table, the sword boy standing strictly behind Zhang Yuobin. The wine shop quickly returned to tranquility. The fragrant Flower Island wine was poured out, and each poured a cup. Now Jikun raised her cup and said, I owe this cup to young master Yuxiao. Let me drink first to show my respect. Lai Yuxiao smiled and said, since we're drinking, let's drink together for fun. Zhang Yuobing didn't stand on ceremony either, downing nearly half the cup in one gulp. She suddenly cried out in surprise, this wine this isn't Flower Island brew. It's clearly drunken sorrow of the departed. Lai Yuxiao, who was drinking, immediately spat it out and coughed uncontrollably. Already disliking him, Zhang Yuobin's face grew even colder as he said, what do you mean? Is the name funny? Lai Yuxiao hurriedly waved his hand and said with a forced smile, no, I just choked while drinking. Zhang Yuobin's expression darkened, and she said coldly, the name Drunken Sorrow of the Departed was given by someone I respect most. If you don't explain yourself clearly, today you will learn what the tip of her sword feels like. With a flick of her wrist, the precious sword appeared in her hand, its cold light flashing. Now Jackshuan and Liu Qingyan both found it strange. Jackshuan whispered, Drunken Sorrow of the Departed sounds nice. I don't understand why the young master laughed. Liu Qingyan pursed his lips and teased, brother Lai is in deep trouble this time if he doesn't explain clearly. Lai Yuxiao's face twisted like a bit of melon, truly not knowing how to speak to avoid the embarrassment. The people in the tavern immediately scattered, everyone wearing forced smiles. This young master was indeed a troublemaker. He had just taken action and was now preparing to fight again. Lai Yuxiao remained silent, not expecting that girl to be so deeply connected with Ningqiu. The three major families of Red Moon City were intricately linked, their roots as tangled as chai soup. When one side encountered trouble, the whole group suffered, and when one side prospered, everyone rejoiced together. As the precious sword rushed forward with a cold gleam, he glanced at it and recognized it as a ninth-grade mystic artifact. He said with a bitter smile, what sorrow could a little girl like you possibly have? Zhang Yuobing flushed with anger and shouted, you're the little girl. You dare call me small? Is that why you found it funny? She gripped the sword tightly and stepped forward. Liu Qingyan said tensely, brother Bing, you can't kill him. Zhang Yuobing snorted coldly, for the sake of big brother Liu and sister Jackshuan, I won't kill him, but I must still teach him a lesson. Liu Qingyan sighed, brother Bing, he is a person I mentioned who can help you. If you provoke him, no one in Red Moon City will be able to save you. Zhang Yuobing was stunned, then huffed, what are you joking about, big brother Liu? He's only a 5-star martial lord. What's so great about that? Lai Yuxiao smiled faintly and said, the ancient rhythm vibrating from this mystic artifact is truly as wonderful as fine wine. He raised 2 fingers to catch the blade, and in an instant, a clashing sound rang out as the sword light was shattered by his flower-picking smile finger. The expressions of the 4 people changed simultaneously, their eyes wide with shock. In Liu Qingyan's eyes, there was both fear and a rising battle intent. Lai Yuxiao's 2 fingers were as hard as diamonds. Touching the mystic artifact made his blood surge. Now Jackshuan's expression also changed. She knew Zhang Yuobin's strength well. Even if she had held back, it shouldn't have been possible to stop the sword with bare hands. Could he have practiced a special cultivation technique specifically for his fingers? Now Jackshuan nodded slightly, confident in her guess that Lai Yuxiao possessed immense finger power. Given his age, he must have practiced arduously since childhood to reach this level. Truly unbelievable. Lai Yuxiao said with a smile, brother Bing, don't be angry. Anger makes you age quickly. Look, you already have a few more wrinkles from being upset. Zhang Yuobing cried out in alarm, is that true? She quickly rubbed her face and turned to Nalan Jackshuan, asking urgently, sister, look and see if there are any wrinkles. A few black marks appeared on Nalan Jackshuan's forehead as she remained silent for a long time, feeling horrified inside. Could his teasing mean he had already seen through her identity? Right then, a loud explosion sounded, and 2 figures were blown inside from the doorway, spitting blood as they hit the ground. It was Zai King and Ji Feibing. At the same time, a voice boomed from outside, when will Red Moon City stop being so cluttered? Any random stray seems to be running all over the streets these days. A group of martial artists entered through the main door, each cold as ice. The old man leading them was the one who had spoken. He snorted coldly and shouted, I was kind enough to break the seal for you, yet you actually injured someone from the glazed mountain villa. You are truly heartless. Zai King was so angry he almost spat blood, shouting loudly, you old scoundrel. You still dare to mention breaking the seal? You used me as an experiment. If I hadn't run fast, I would have lost my life. The old man stared at him and said coldly, breaking a seal naturally carries risks. I am not some peerless expert who can do it effortlessly. It's a matter of luck, but no matter how lucky you were, today you have no way out. Daring to injure a disciple of Glazed Mountain Villa, even if your master comes, he won't be able to save you. Zai King gritted his teeth and said, Pei Minjuan, we once had a friendship, yet you are so heartless. Ji Feibing stood trembling nearby and hurriedly said, Senior, please calm down. I was only traveling with him. We aren't actually close. I hope Senior spares my life. Zai King was both shocked and enraged, shaking uncontrollably. The old man sneered, is that so? Since you were traveling together, you might as well go to the afterlife together. The aura around him gradually began to surge. Within the blink of an eye, it suppressed the entire tavern. Everyone's faces turned pale. Pei Minjuan, standing in the crowd, suddenly had a change of expression. He immediately recognized Lai Yuxiao and shouted coldly, Father, that guy is the one who coursed the seal. He pointed straight at Lai Yuxiao, his eyes burning with fury and his body trembling slightly.